Hi everyone, this is one of those stories that starts quietly, almost invisibly, the kind of life that people step over without noticing, until the ground shifts beneath them. Before we begin, take a second to like this story, subscribe for more truths wrapped in power, and welcome to Black Queen Dominion, where underestimation becomes the spark of destiny. This story is not about revenge born from cruelty. It is about reckoning born from patience. It is about a Black woman whose strength was mistaken for silence, whose humility was confused for weakness, and whose profession was reduced to a label that others believed defined her worth. She entered the family not with grandeur, not with inherited wealth, not with titles stitched into her name, but with tired hands, disciplined compassion, and a calling rooted in care. She was a nurse, and in that word they believed they had captured the limit of her future. From the beginning, her presence unsettled them, not because she demanded space but because she occupied it without apology. The family she married into prized hierarchy, appearances, and prestige. They measured success in surnames and status, in where one studied and who one impressed. And she, with her hospital shifts and scrubs that smelled of antiseptic and exhaustion, did not fit neatly into their polished picture. She married their son with hope, not illusion. She believed partnership meant growth together, that love expanded when nurtured by respect. But from the earliest days, it became clear that she had married into a house where love came with conditions and respect was rationed. Her mother-in-law viewed her not as a woman, but as an inconvenience. A reminder that her son had chosen something outside the image she curated for her lineage. At gatherings, introductions were trimmed. Her achievements were minimized. Her long nights saving lives were reframed as menial labor. The word nurse was wielded not as a profession but as a ceiling. What they never understood was that nursing had never been her destination. It was her foundation. She worked in silence, not because she lacked ambition, but because she carried it carefully. Her days began before sunrise and ended long after the city slept. She memorized textbooks during stolen moments, studied anatomy while others relaxed, and transformed exhaustion into fuel. Her dreams did not shout. They waited. Her husband noticed none of this. Or perhaps he chose not to. Comfort has a way of dulling curiosity, and privilege often blinds those who benefit from it. He accepted her sacrifices as background noise, her labor as a given, her strength as something that required no acknowledgement. He absorbed his family's disdain without resistance, allowing their dismissal of her to settle into the walls of their marriage. Each slight carved a quiet wound. Each dismissive glance sharpened her resolve. She watched the way respect shifted when doctors entered a room. She observed how voices softened, how assumptions changed, how authority was granted before a word was spoken. And she learned, not out of envy but out of clarity. She learned that power in this world was often mistaken for intelligence and visibility for value. So she prepared herself to become undeniable. Years passed, marked by discipline invisible to those who underestimated her. While they laughed at her little job, she advanced through relentless study. While they praised themselves for superiority, she trained her mind to precision. While they believed her stationary, she was moving, strategically, quietly forward. The hospital became both her battlefield and her classroom. She absorbed knowledge with intention, mastered procedures, and developed a composure that only comes from responsibility over life and death. Patients trusted her instinctively. Colleagues leaned on her. Yet still outside those walls she remained just a nurse to those who refused to see. Her mother-in-law's contempt sharpened over time, especially as her independence grew. The more self-assured she became, the more threatening she appeared. There is nothing more unsettling to fragile egos than a woman who does not ask permission to evolve. At family events, conversations about careers circled past her like she was furniture. Achievements were celebrated so long as they belonged to others. When her long-term studies demanded time, her absence was framed as neglect. When her focus narrowed, it was labeled arrogance. But she kept going. What they did not know was that her journey was nearing completion. That the sacrifices, the nights of doubt, the years of invisibility, were converging toward something irreversible. She was stepping into a role they never imagined her capable of holding. And fate, patient and precise, was preparing the moment of truth. It arrived not with drama but with urgency. A sudden illness. A rushed admission. A family thrown into panic by vulnerability they could not control. The same halls she walked daily now became unfamiliar terrain for them. The same system they once belittled became their lifeline. They rushed him in, the man who had stood beside her without standing up for her. The man who had benefited from her strength while overlooking her ascent. He lay powerless in a place where titles dissolved and expertise mattered. And somewhere in that hospital, wearing authority she had earned, carrying knowledge forged through sacrifice, she was no longer invisible. She was ready. The hospital had a way of stripping people down to their essentials. Status dissolved at the automatic doors. Pride weakened under fluorescent lights. Fear leveled every hierarchy. For her, these halls were familiar, almost sacred. For them, they were terrifying. She moved through the corridors with a calm that came only from years of service. Her posture was different now, not louder, not arrogant, but grounded in certainty. The long road of discipline had reshaped her presence. Every step carried intention. Every breath carried authority. The admission came quickly, urgently. A condition that had been ignored too long finally demanded attention. The man who once dismissed her ambition now depended on a system he barely understood. His family hovered, anxious and disoriented, clinging to reputations that meant nothing here. They did not recognize her at first. She was not in scrubs anymore. The uniform of quiet endurance had been replaced by the symbol of earned command. The white coat rested on her shoulders not as costume but as culmination. Years of sacrifice were stitched into its seams. Knowledge weighed heavier than fabric and she carried it effortlessly. Her name appeared on charts, on screens, on doors. Credentials followed it, hard-won, undeniable. The woman they had reduced to a stereotype had stepped into a role they had never imagined her occupying. Recognition dawned slowly, painfully. Confusion rippled through them as they tried to reconcile memory with reality. The image they clung to, of a woman beneath them, collapsed under evidence they could not ignore. The hospital staff deferred to her without question. Instructions were followed. Assessments respected. Authority acknowledged. She did not seek their reaction. She did not pause to savor disbelief. Her focus was singular. The patient, the condition, the responsibility she carried. Professionalism anchored her. Compassion guided her. But beneath it all there was a quiet gravity, a reckoning unfolding without words. The irony was unmissable. The place where she had once been invisible had become the stage for her transformation. The same family who dismissed her intelligence now relied on it. The same woman they belittled now held the knowledge that could determine outcomes. Yet she felt no triumph. What she felt was clarity. She remembered the nights she studied while the house slept. The mornings she left before sunrise and returned after dark. The times her exhaustion was mistaken for disinterest. The sacrifices that went unnoticed because they were made quietly. Every moment had led here, not for revenge but for purpose. The medical case was complex. Years of neglect had layered complications upon complications. She analyzed data with precision, drawing from both academic rigor and lived experience. Nursing had taught her something textbooks never could: how bodies tell stories long before words appear. How pain hides. How resilience masks damage. She saw what others missed. Her decisions were firm, her approach measured. She balanced empathy with discipline, urgency with control. The hospital staff trusted her instincts because she had earned that trust long before she earned the title. And as she worked, the family watched, helpless observers in a world where she now belonged and they did not. Her mother-in-law, once so assured in her judgments, struggled to reconcile authority with resentment. The hierarchy she believed immutable had inverted. The woman she considered beneath her now stood as gatekeeper to knowledge, to healing, to hope. But the hospital did not care about family dynamics. Illness does not negotiate with pride. Biology does not respect prejudice. The body responds only to competence. And competence was what she delivered. As hours passed, the gravity of the situation settled in. The reality that survival depended on decisions made by the woman they once dismissed forced a reckoning deeper than words could express. The silence around them grew heavy, not empty but full of unspoken truths. She felt the emotional weight of the moment, but she did not let it interfere. Professional boundaries held firm. She had trained for this. Not just academically but emotionally. She understood the cost of attachment, the necessity of objectivity. Still, memory lingered. She remembered the comments disguised as concern. The subtle mockery framed as advice. The way her ambition had been questioned, her intelligence doubted, her dreams minimized. She remembered shrinking herself to maintain peace, swallowing pride to preserve harmony. And she remembered the moment she stopped shrinking. Standing there now, she understood something profound. Their judgment had never been about her profession. It had been about control. About their discomfort with a woman who could not be contained by their expectations. Her success exposed the fragility of their assumptions. The hospital staff continued their work seamlessly, treating her as what she was. A leader, a doctor, a professional whose presence commanded respect. The transformation was complete, though not sudden. It had been years in the making. She glanced once briefly at the man lying vulnerable before her. Not with bitterness, not with satisfaction, but with the clarity of someone who had outgrown the need for validation. The power dynamic had shifted, but she did not need to emphasize it. Reality had done that for her. Outside the room, uncertainty loomed. Inside, she worked with steady hands and a focused mind. Every decision was deliberate. Every action rooted in responsibility. This was not revenge. This was consequence. And as the hours stretched on, the family began to understand something they had never considered. That worth is not granted by opinion, and destiny does not ask permission from those who underestimate it. She had become undeniable. The chapter closes with the family waiting, powerless, humbled, forced to confront the truth they had ignored for years. The woman they thought they knew had surpassed every boundary they placed upon her. Time moved differently inside the hospital. Minutes stretched, hours compressed, and uncertainty settled into every corner like a heavy fog. For the family waiting outside, time felt like punishment. For her, it felt like purpose. She had spent years mastering patience. Silence had been her training ground. Every moment she was overlooked, every instance her intelligence was questioned, every time her contribution was reduced to a title that others felt entitled to diminish. It had all sharpened her discipline. Now that discipline guided her hands and her mind with unwavering precision. Inside the controlled chaos of medicine, she was unshaken. This was her realm, built not on inheritance or opinion but on competence. The hospital did not care who her in-laws were, how they viewed her, or what assumptions they had clung to for comfort. It responded only to expertise. She reviewed results, adjusted plans, and anticipated complications before they surfaced. The years she spent as a nurse had given her an intuition few possessed. She understood the body not just as a system but as a story, one shaped by neglect, stress, pride, and denial. The man she treated carried all of that within him. Every decision she made was layered with meaning, though she never allowed emotion to interfere. Professionalism did not erase memory, but it kept it in its place. She had learned that power was not loud. It did not need to announce itself. It simply acted. Outside, the family shifted uncomfortably, stripped of certainty. They were accustomed to control, to environments where their opinions shaped outcomes. Here they were spectators. Their influence stopped at the door. Her mother-in-law in particular felt the weight of this reversal. For years she had spoken as if the world were a ladder and she stood above. Now she waited below, dependent on the very woman she had dismissed. The discomfort was not just fear, it was exposure. A lifetime of assumptions unraveled in the quiet hum of hospital machinery. And still there were no apologies. No acknowledgments. Pride, when threatened, often clings harder to denial. But denial could not change reality. The staff deferred to her judgment instinctively. They trusted her because she had proven herself long before this moment. Her authority was not borrowed. It was built. Step by step, exam by exam, sacrifice by sacrifice. She thought back to the nights she questioned herself. The moments she wondered if endurance was worth the cost. The loneliness of ambition when no one else believed. Those memories surfaced not as pain but as validation. She had not imagined her strength. She had forged it. The man on the bed represented more than a medical case. He was a symbol of a life she had once tried to make smaller to fit expectations. A life where she prioritized peace over truth, harmony over self-respect. Treating him now was not an act of dominance. It was an act of closure. She realized something profound in those hours. She no longer needed acknowledgement from any of them. Her worth no longer depended on recognition. She had crossed a threshold where validation came from within, reinforced by the reality of who she had become. That realization was freedom. The condition stabilized slowly, deliberately. Progress did not come with celebration, only with careful monitoring and unwavering attention. Healing, she knew, was rarely dramatic. It was incremental, fragile, earned. As responsibility weighed on her shoulders, she carried it without complaint. This was what she had prepared for. Not the irony, not the reversal, but the responsibility. Lives did not pause for personal history. They demanded presence. And she was fully present. Outside, whispers moved through the waiting area. Confusion turned into reluctant awareness. The narrative they had clung to for years no longer held. The woman they thought they understood had evolved beyond their comprehension. They began to realize that her silence had never meant submission. It had been strategy, growth, preparation. There is a particular discomfort that arises when people are forced to confront the truth of someone they underestimated. It is not just embarrassment, it is grief for the certainty they lost. They had believed they knew their place in the world. Now that place felt unstable. She felt none of that turmoil. Her inner world was calm, anchored by clarity. She had outgrown the need to compete with perception. Her journey had never been about proving them wrong. It had been about honoring herself. As the night deepened, the hospital quieted. The steady rhythm of machines replaced the frantic pace of earlier hours. She allowed herself a brief moment of reflection. Not regret, not resentment, but acknowledgement of distance traveled. She had entered that family as someone seeking acceptance. She stood now as someone complete without it. This chapter of her life was closing. Not with confrontation, not with vindication, but with transformation so complete that the past could no longer define her. And yet the story was not finished. Because survival was only the beginning. What came next would force truths long avoided into the open. Not spoken in anger, but revealed through consequence. The family would have to face not just who she had become, but who they had been. And for the first time she would not carry that weight for them. Morning light filtered through the hospital windows, pale and indifferent. It illuminated faces drained of certainty and revealed truths that darkness had hidden. For the family, the night had been long and humbling. For her, it had been steady, purposeful, transformative. The condition had stabilized. Not resolved, not erased, but brought under control by skill, timing, and unwavering focus. Survival, however, has a way of awakening more than relief. It stirs reflection. It exposes fault lines long ignored. She reviewed updates with precision, her demeanor unchanged. Calm did not mean cold. It meant grounded. Every choice she made reflected years of preparation, not just academically but emotionally. She had learned to separate what she felt from what was required, and in doing so she had mastered herself. The family sensed a shift, though no one named it. The crisis that once united them in panic now united them in discomfort. They were forced to sit with the reality that the woman they had diminished was the reason hope existed at all. Her mother-in-law's certainty had cracked. The matriarch who once spoke with unchallenged authority now moved cautiously, as if afraid that one wrong step would further expose the fragility of her beliefs. Pride warred with gratitude and pride was losing. Yet still no apology came. Apologies require humility, and humility does not come easily to those who have built their identity on superiority. But humility was no longer optional. It was being demanded by circumstance. She did not wait for acknowledgement. He did not need it. She moved through her responsibilities with quiet authority, issuing instructions, reviewing progress, ensuring continuity of care. Every action reinforced what words never could, that her presence here was not symbolic, it was essential. The man she treated began to regain awareness. Fragility replaced confidence. Dependency replaced control. In vulnerability, people often see what they once ignored. And though she did not seek his recognition, she recognized something in him. A reckoning unfolding internally, unspoken but undeniable. Power dynamics reveal themselves most clearly in moments of need. She remembered a time when she had needed him, needed support, defense, belief. When she had waited for him to speak up, to challenge the narrative that reduced her. He had chosen comfort over courage. Silence over solidarity. Now the roles had shifted. But she did not dwell on it. Resentment had no place in her life anymore. She had released it somewhere along the way during those long nights of study, when she realized that carrying bitterness only delayed freedom. The family watched her differently now. Not with warmth, not with familiarity, but with a cautious respect they had never offered before. It was not the respect of understanding. It was the respect of recognition forced by reality. She saw it clearly. They did not value her journey. They valued her outcome. And that too was a lesson. She understood now that some people will never honor the process. They only acknowledge success once it can no longer be denied. Waiting for their validation would have kept her stagnant forever. As the day progressed, conversations shifted around her. Plans were discussed in hushed tones. The future was uncertain, and uncertainty makes people reveal themselves. They began to ask questions, not about her well-being, not about her years of sacrifice, but about prognosis, outcomes, timelines. Always utility. Never accountability. And still she remained composed. She felt a quiet sadness, not for herself but for the limitations of those around her. They had been given the opportunity to grow alongside her and had chosen to stand still instead. They had mistaken dominance for strength and control for worth. She had learned otherwise. In the quiet moments between tasks, she reflected on the woman she once was. The one who tried to earn acceptance through compliance. The one who believed that love required endurance. That woman had been brave, but she had been tired. This woman was free. Freedom did not come from leaving. It came from becoming. She no longer needed to confront them with words. Her existence spoke loudly enough. Her success was not a rebuttal. It was a boundary. A line drawn between who she had been and who she would never be again. The family sensed the distance growing, though they did not understand it. They mistook her calm for reconciliation, her professionalism for forgiveness. But forgiveness does not require proximity, and healing does not demand return. She had outgrown the version of herself that needed to be seen by them. As evening approached, the hospital resumed its familiar rhythm. Life continued, indifferent to personal awakenings. She prepared to hand over care, ensuring everything was in place. Responsibility fulfilled. Duty honored. She paused once, just once, allowing herself to acknowledge the magnitude of what had occurred. Not the irony. Not the reversal. But the truth. She had become the woman they never believed she could be. And she had done it without their support. The hospital released its grip slowly, as it always did. Machines quieted, charts closed, routines resumed. Crisis gave way to continuity, and with it came the subtle understanding that something irreversible had occurred, not just in a patient's body but in the shape of a life. She walked the halls one last time with the same steady confidence that had carried her through the longest night. But now there was something else beneath her calm: finality. Not bitterness. Not triumph. Completion. The man she treated would recover, though recovery would be long and demanding. Survival had altered him. Vulnerability has a way of reshaping priorities, of exposing truths once buried beneath routine and ego. Whether he would fully understand the weight of what had happened was no longer her concern. She had done her duty. The family lingered in that strange space between gratitude and discomfort. They wanted resolution without accountability, closure without reflection. But some lessons are not meant to be handed over gently. Some are meant to be lived with. Her mother-in-law avoided her gaze now, not out of anger, but out of recognition she did not know how to process. The hierarchy she once enforced had dissolved, and in its place stood a reality she could not undo. The woman she belittled had surpassed every expectation without ever asking permission. And still there were no apologies. But for the first time the absence of apology did not wound her. It did not linger. It simply existed, and then it passed. Because she no longer needed anything from them. She understood now that closure is not something others give you. It is something you claim when you stop seeking permission to move on. The power she carried was not in her title, her education, or even her achievements. It was in her self-definition. She had crowned herself long before anyone else noticed. As she prepared to leave, she felt a quiet gratitude for the journey, not for the pain but for the resilience it revealed. Every dismissal had forced her inward. Every underestimation had sharpened her focus. Every silence had taught her discipline. She had not survived despite them. She had risen because she chose herself. The hospital doors opened and daylight greeted her, not as revelation but as affirmation. The world outside was the same, but she was not. She no longer carried the weight of being misunderstood. She no longer adjusted herself to fit expectations that were never built for her success. Her future stretched wide and unclaimed. She thought about the countless women like her. Women whose labor is overlooked, whose ambition is questioned, whose strength is mistaken for obligation. Women told to be grateful for crumbs while they quietly build empires in their minds. This story was for them. Not a fantasy of revenge, but a blueprint of becoming. She did not walk away in anger. She walked away in alignment. The chapter of her life defined by endurance had closed. What awaited her now was expansion. On her terms, in her voice, with her boundaries intact. She would continue to heal, to lead, to grow. Not to prove anything, but because growth was her nature. The crown she wore was invisible to those who valued appearances, but unmistakable to those who understood power. True power does not seek permission. It does not explain itself. It simply stands. And as she stepped forward, unburdened and whole, one truth echoed louder than any insult ever had. She had never been just a nurse. She had always been a queen in preparation.